This Sunday, the fourth Sunday of Lent, we are privileged and blessed to hear the account of the prodigal son from Luke chapter 15. It's known also as a parable of losing and finding, which unites it to the other two parables. I wish to reflect with you on an incredible, astonishing illumination in the St. John's Bible, accomplished by Donald Jackson and Aidan Hart and other illuminators as well. And once you see me unpack this or hear me unpack this, you'll know immediately why it involved so many members of Jackson's team. When we look at this illumination, we see a series of channels that, if you will, run in this direction. And it's, I believe, a very creative way for Donald Jackson and his team to accomplish the work of bringing together so many different parables into a single illumination. If you recall from Genesis 1, the days of the week are set in parallel, if you will, strands up and down the page. By taking that same idea, but turning it to the side, he's able to, if you will, create space for the narrative quality of the parables themselves and show different, if you will, sequences of action, either for a three-dimensional or an illumination or text. So in this topmost division here, you see the 10 coins and the lost coin right here in platinum, and the others are here. And again, it's more almost like, if you will, name that tune. We see that, and it takes us to the parable we already know. We already have it in our heads and in our hearts. The second band here is this lonely, lonely sheep with the angels over here. But you can see how far they're apart and just how lost this sheep is. And this is St. Benedict's imagination as well, in the rule, when he imagines the abbot and directs the abbot to look out for the lost sheep, the lost monk in the house who is drifting away from the practice of monastic life, and to reach out toward him. Note that these are all angels, all in brilliant gold. This third band here is the parable of the Good Samaritan, perhaps the most well-known parable in the entire set of Gospels. And here simply text dominates. And it progresses in this direction. It begins with the priest who sees and walks by on the other side, to the Levite, slightly lower in class, walks by on the other side, and finally the Samaritan who doesn't belong anywhere and doesn't fit anywhere, has no social status. He is the one who, in fact, was moved to pity and bandages the wounds of the man who has been beaten half to death in the ditch. And then, of course, that loaded question: which of these acted as neighbor toward the injured man? This next band is the one I'm most concerned with this morning, and I will come to it very quickly. And that's the man who had two sons. And finally, here we have the story here, the illumination of the rich man and Lazarus. Lazarus, a poor man, the only character in any parable who's ever given a name. So we sometimes think of the poor as utterly nameless, but here in the Gospels, this poor man who is at the edge of the rich man's house has the name Lazarus. And finally, over here, Jesus in full glory, and Martha and Mary both listening to Jesus. I want to look back right now then to this parable here. And if you look at the very bottom of this illumination, you can see that there are some 7 or 8 hogs here. They clearly are not Minnesota or Iowa hogs. They look like they haven't had a lot to eat recently. But they're prominent in the story because in the Jewish sensibility, hogs are unclean. And you don't eat them, you don't associate with them, you don't have anything to do with them. And yet this young man here has, in fact, when he has lost everything and nobody cares at all about him, he is reduced, if you will, to feeding the hogs. And then his father, seeing him approaching home, as the parable tells us, running out to meet his son. And right with him is the brightly colored coat that will again wrap him in the Father's forgiveness and love and proclaim him and hold him as son. And then, as we move further down this narrative path, right at the time this was being illuminated, the Twin Towers were destroyed on 9/11/2001. Jackson and his team were so moved by that event, realizing that this had profound implications for the entire world, and that no matter what happened going forward, forgiveness had to be part of it. And the forgiveness that comes from God and works through us, forgiveness that's way beyond logic and reason, forgiveness that embraces the fullness of the redemption won for us in Jesus Christ. So Jackson and his team put the Twin Towers here in gold, which is a very interesting decision. What does that mean for us? Paul VI, at the end of the 1960s, in one of his letters, noted that if you want peace, work for justice. In the late 80s, John Paul II, in one of his major addresses, said the following. He said, look, if you want justice, work for forgiveness. Because St. John Paul II realized that there are times when just trying to settle accounts or to make things fair can never ever undo the damage that's been done. That in fact the only thing that can settle that debt is forgiveness. Not only that, we may think that forgiveness is just something you and I do and work toward every day in our lives, or that Christian communities do that. But John Paul II's fundamental insight is that no, in fact, ultimately, nations and political groups and societies and ethnic groups have to work toward forgiveness if there is ever to be justice and peace. That forgiveness and reconciliation are absolutely essential. So as you reflect, if you have a chance to look at this illumination, I ask you to look at and reflect on these dynamic relationships and think about why Jackson put those Twin Towers in bright, gleaming gold. Gold that is normally associated with divine action and with mercy and forgiveness and love and healing.